Hi, thanks for tuning in. Joe Simhard here again, October 28th, with part two on my spiel on Eckhart Tolle. I ended kind of abruptly on my last segment regarding him because I try to keep these under 15 minutes if I can. So I mentioned that he seems to borrow quite a bit from the New Thought milieu of thinkers out there who kind of see things as a mental process of changing themselves and changing the world and accessing the mind of God, if you will, or the essence of being, or Dasein, as Heidegger would have said. But there's a few other connections I'd like to make here. Eckhart Tolle, in another incarnation, if you will, was represented, at least his ideas were represented by this guy. All right, you might recognize him. He passed away in 2015. His name is Wayne Dyer. He appeared many times on national public radio and on public television. One of the favorite guests. He was a motivational speaker. He was known to be a guidance counselor when he was younger. He borrowed quite a few ideas from Abraham Maslow, hierarchy of needs, and Albert Ellis, especially in his early career. Ellis, by the way, was quite upset with Dyer, who published his first book, The Erroneous Zones, and Ellis said it was probably the worst example of plagiarism of his work. Ellis developed rational emotive therapy back in the day. So this was back in the 80s when a letter to Dyer from Ellis was released. Dyer never responded. Dyer went on to great fame. He kept referring later in his career on source and going back to this inner source, kind of like Tolle continually talks about now, and going into that unmanifest space within in order to somehow reach the font of deep God wisdom within the self, the non-dual range of awareness. What's interesting about Dyer, Wayne Dyer, again, who died in 2015, he was also influenced, it says here, by the 1990s, the focus of his work has shifted to spirituality inspired by Swami Muktananda, highly controversial guru Muktananda, sex offender with some of his devotees, and quite a manipulator with his Siddha yoga practice. I'm not going to get into this. I've had a lot of cult cases involving Swami Muktananda and his followers. And then he was also, it says here that Dyer was also influenced by New Thought, again, that milieu that I was talking about. And he promoted themes such as the power of intention. In other words, if you think something, you intend it, the universe will bring it back to you, kind of like the book The Secret talked about. Same idea, New Thought. And then he collaborated with alternative medicine advocate Deepak Chopra, again, in this same realm of magical mind power, and on a number of other projects. And he was a frequent guest on Guess Who? Oprah Winfrey Show. All right, so I'm picking on this idea of New Thought because I find that it's kind of a shallow philosophy. It pervades American religion in so many different ways. Think and Get Rich, Norman Vincent Peale. It goes on and on to the Course in Miracles and other things that have gone on today. The Crystal Cathedral, for instance, that was run by Reverend Schuller. So what's the problem here? Well, what I find is that the people that get into Eastern religion from the West often become consciousness junkies. They take up yoga, they take up different kinds of paths. One of the ones that caught my ear recently when I listened to Eckhart Tolle video, he mentioned Gurdjieff in a positive way. And why would he mention Gurdjieff? G.I. Gurdjieff, who died in 1949. Well, Gurdjieff was a proponent of something called self-remembering. In other words, he would use different shock tactics or different manipulations to get people to remember their self, and then to build a soul, so to speak, so that it wouldn't get eaten by the moon. These are metaphors in his world. The idea is that you need to accelerate your consciousness, because we're in dire times, end times are coming or whatever. And he was Gurdjieff with his Seekers of Truth and his following would accelerate consciousness because it was necessary in order to build a soul that would last forever, and whatever all that meant, I don't know. But people weren't sure what Gurdjieff was really talking about. Some of them after being with him for 20 years or more. But he was certainly impressive and highly manipulative. He was a master hypnotist. So why would Eckhart Tolle reference Gurdjieff? Well, because they're in the same ballpark. They're teaching essentially the same thing. You know, you want to go access this inner self, you need a teacher to do it or someone to stimulate it. You know, and of course, in today's world, teachers are mainly online, but people like Eckhart Tolle are available in countless videos and lectures, and if you want, you can attend a personal workshop for some thousands of dollars. So these issues that I find troublesome are what I call, or what have been called, overvalued ideas. They're not necessarily delusions, they're not psychotic ideas, they're not necessarily wrong. They might have some value, but they become overvalued very quickly when someone keeps turning to them to solve a problem, you know, a particular type of meditation, a particular guru's ideas. You know, I knew a woman who became obsessed with Krishnamurti's teachings back in the 80s, and she tried to practice everything he said. She ended up flipping out. She had a mood disorder and ended up in therapy for a month in a hospital. Again, overly valuing the ideas turned it into an obsession, and it made her psychotic in a sense. She couldn't come back from that delusion. So what's an overvalued idea? So in Symptoms of the Mind, written by Andrew Sims, it's an old standard of mine that I turn to. He talks about erroneous ideation. And he says here that an overvalued idea is an acceptable, comprehensive idea pursued by the patient, you know, or the person, beyond the bounds of reason. It is usually associated with abnormal personality. So, you know, when you talk to anyone that's met someone like Dyer or Muktananda or Gurdjieff or even Tolle, you'll notice them talking about them either in glowing terms or kind of quizzical terms. These people are outsized personalities. They're not necessarily disordered personalities, but they definitely don't fit within the normal range of human personality and behavior. They are heroes. They present themselves on stage. They seem to like the limelight despite their humility, which they tend to express. But they kind of thrive on this idea that their ideas mean something. Tolle, you know, and I'm going to go back to the first book, The Power of Now, where he takes on this role that you are here, and he could say, I am here, to enable the divine purpose of the universe to unfold. You know, that's an overvalued idea. It's an overvaluing of the self, that somehow you are this little funnel, this little vessel, this constriction of reality, and certainly full of flaws, as well as beauty and wonderful traits and all that other stuff, but definitely limited. That somehow you are going to express the wonder of the universe through yourself, and that's your role in life. You know, that's kind of grandiose. That's an expression of narcissism in the extreme. And I think that when you get involved with people like that, whether it's Tolle or Muktananda or Gurdjieff or the New Thought milieu, got to be very careful about how much power and relief you're going to get from practicing those kinds of teachings. Anyway, I'm going to let that go, except for one point. I want to get back to the dog attack I talked about, how this relates. In a situation like that, you're in the moment. There's no time to think. I mean, there's a pit bull. It's got my dog by the throat. I don't know if it's got a jugular vein. I don't know what's going to happen. And you begin to act. You try to act with enough appropriate power and effort and thought to resolve the situation without doing more damage. And I think I accomplished it. I don't know why. My instincts were pretty good. I had enough strength. Maybe this is just the way dogs behave. When you put a knee on their neck, they let go. But that kind of being in the now is more about the visceral idea of life itself, which is full of mud and blood and a lot of other things that we tend to like to avoid, like smelly things or whatever. In Eckhart Tolle's little world, his armchair view of metaphysics and God and himself and all of that, I find that kind of visceral energy that I see in life and experience in many different ways missing. It's all kind of in the head. It's in the essence. It's in this so-called God self or non-dual presence, which nobody can say anything about, but we talk about it all the time. The idea of having a non-dual consciousness is an illusion, is an overvalued idea. There is no human being that can approach that while they are alive. I don't care who the guru is. I don't care how deep their meditation is. I don't care if they're in a coma. If they're alive, they are in a dual relationship. There is the other. There is life and death. So it's not really about avoiding dualism. It's about enhancing your relationship with the other. It's about coming up with a way of managing life that includes healthy relationship, which means dualism in many ways. So in fact, that's what human beings are. We are beings in the world. There's us in the world. I mean, if you want to put it in a global sense, the way Jesus did, be in the world but not of the world. We can't escape that. The only escape really is death. And even then, we don't really know. And I think we need to leave it at that. So I just find a lot of this non-dual meditative talk that Eckhart Tolle tries to purvey and sell us in a certain way is very limited. I think you need to look at the New Thought movement and see if what I'm saying is correct about Eckhart Tolle. So that's all I have to say about him. I don't want to keep picking on him. I don't think he's a bad guy, but I do think he's got a problem with his ego. Thank you.